Evening and welcome to tonight's session of Ask the Farmer Q&A. My name is Bridget Barry and I coordinate Farming for Nature. Our Q&A sessions are a great way to hear from our ambassadors. So each year we try and source about 12 to 15 Farming for Nature ambassadors across all different land types and farming systems in Ireland. And then each month we have a chat to one of these ambassadors. And this allows us to, sorry, I'm just going to turn off camera there. And this just allows us to find out some more and for you guys to find out how they use their farming systems and practical actions towards nature. So what we'll do is over the next hour, I'll kickstart the event, have a chat with our guest speaker. And then if you have any questions, pop them into the chat box and I'll facilitate them as we go along. So tonight we are delighted to have dairy farmer from County Laois, David Kerr, join us. David, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bridget.
David, brilliant. So you run a 70-acre dairy farm, as I said, in County Laois. You might just tell us your journey onto this farm.
Hectares, actually, yeah. I'm farming here since the mid-80s. When I finished my second level education. Family came here about 100 years ago. My great-grandfather bought the place and my grandfather started farming about 95 years ago. He was in the First World War, survived it, thankfully. So we're coming up on 100 years here at this stage.
Excellent. Yeah. And your farming system, can you just tell me what it is and how it runs throughout the year?
Yeah, sure. Look, we had a mixed farming system all through, say, the milk quota era and before that, which had been traditional around this part of the country. You know, dairy cows, beef cattle, sheep, tillage, small, spuds, that sort of stuff. We started moving towards specialising in dairying, I suppose, around 06 when you actually could buy milk quota, and we moved we milked 40 odd cows all through the milk quota regime. So we moved to 140 cows by the time the milk quotas were abolished. We paid for all the quota. We got no free quota. Like, we had expansion done before quotas were actually abolished. So we've been sitting at 150 cows there since, and we have a small flock of rare breed sheep, Dorset Horn. So they seem to be a little bit of an anomaly to a lot of people when they come to visit, but they've been around the place for 40 odd years, so they'll be here for a while yet, I think.
You're not getting rid of them yet. And tell me, do you have the two different livestock because you have a varied land type, is it?
No, I mean, the sheep flock is so small, it's 20 ewes. It's just, there's a kind of quota on the sheep. Like, any more than that, it's just too much trouble around the place. But I mean, the kids had them as they grew up, and I wouldn't say they're hugely profitable or anything, but they're not losing money either. So yeah, they're just a very rare breed. So it's nice to have them.
You get used to them around the place. And can you explain to us your kind of land type for those of us who haven't been to your land there, David?
Yeah, sure. We have everything from free draining loam soil down to, we have a lot of peatland, cutaway bog that was maybe reclaimed 40 years ago, just put into grass. So we'd have a lot of that sort of stuff. A lot of it's very, very wet at the moment, but the whole country is wet at the moment, to be fair to be said. Yeah. So look, we're fairly well covered, like, for dry weather and wet weather. There's kind of a mix of dry and heavy soils, but yeah, so you work around that as you go.
And I'm guessing, we're mid-spring, it's a busy time on a dairy farm. What's going on your farm at the moment on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, we started calving there around the 1st of February. So look, we're heading for 75% calved at the moment. So it's been the busiest time of year, the same as any dairy farm. I have a student here. I get overseas students just to help at calving, and mainly from Switzerland, some from Holland, and they're here for until the middle of April, when the work starts to reduce fairly rapidly. We don't have a replacement stock on this farm. All calves and replacement heifers, they're reared by a farmer down in Kilkenny and have been for the last 15 years. I don't do very much machinery work. Local contractors do practically 90% of that sort of stuff. I just concentrate on the cows and the grass, and I have a very good, reliable relief milker who's been coming here for about the last 30 years.
Wow, brilliant. And so your calves leave at about 4 weeks, is it, off the land? Or
Yeah,
4 to 5 weeks?
really like, for selling calves now, they really have to be well grown, and that's certainly for sale in the market, that they have to be 4 weeks old anyway. So
Mm,
we send the heifer calves down to do the contract where we're only starting to sell bull calves probably the next week or so.
okay. So on 70 hectares, sorry, 70 hectares, and you were saying you're about 150, is it? Milking.
Yeah, yeah.
So is that less than a cow an acre or?
We're stocked at a cow to the acre in all money. Nowadays they talk about kilos of organic nitrogen and all this sort of stuff. So as a cow to the acre is 220 kilos of organic nitrogen. So we're in derogation. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So you'd be considered intensive, but you were saying productive. Can you just explain that to someone like me who would need that kind of laid out for what that means?
Um, I suppose, yeah, intensive. I don't know. I suppose we're heavier stocked. We carry more animals. Probably use more chemical nitrogen than average. Although we're moving away from that with clover and mixed species stuff like that. Generally, the dairy farmers are the more heavily stocked farmers in the country for various reasons. I suppose the one big reason is that by international standards, we actually have quite small farms. The average farm in Ireland across all sectors is about 30 hectares, and
Mm,
that's in three divisions. So it's a product of our history, I suppose. Under British rule and things like that, and tenant farmers. Like we have a lot of fragmented farms. The large scale farms are there, but they're in the minority. The big hundreds of acres and that, like, because the average farm, by international standards in Ireland, is not that big.
okay. But even though you are intensive, you still actually manage to leave 12% for nature on your land, which is quite, I mean, it's quite impressive, quite a lot. How has that panned out, or what was the kind of history behind that?
Well, it's actually 19%. I don't know where the Kremlin got.
Okay.
Look,
Okay.
as a kind of a function of my father over his lifetime was hugely into nature and the countryside, and all his lifetime he was, planting off corners around the farm and putting a fence across a corner, planting a few trees or whatever, things like that. So we're actually just at the stage like a lot of the woodland and wildlife corners on the farm actually need to be thinned. That's how long they're in, like,
Mm,
So kind of these things don't pop up overnight. And he was driven by that sort of stuff. I helped him and everything at the time, but I wouldn't say, he was the driver on the farm in that area over his lifetime. We have a
mm,
lot of, there's a lot of hedges. Sure, every farm in the country probably has in and around 10% hedgerows anyway, whether they're managed well or not. And I suppose we have the extra then with there's 3 acres of oak trees. There's 4 or 5 acres of cutaway bog, which was never developed. Yeah, should we have a lake for the last 3 years, and that's kind of a story in itself. And I suppose I'd be lying if I said I had a huge interest in this area all my life, but it's certainly developed over the last few years certainly since my father died. So maybe to
interesting,
say
yeah.
as you grow older, you get more like your parents or something. But maybe that's his
he
legacy. Mm,
he threw you the mantle as he was on his way.
yeah.
Um, so I know you put a kind of huge, just we'll come back to the pond and stuff in a while in the woodland, but I know you put kind of a huge amount of focus on, say, grassland management. What have you done over the years that's changed how you manage your grass, uh, in general?
Which look, I farmed all through the quota era, and with ryegrass pastures, nitrogen was cheap as chips. You just horsed it out. There was no limits on what you could use really until a few years ago, and that's all changed in the last few years for various reasons. For, environmental challenges, whatever. We have to get smarter about how we grow grass. We have to try and get away with less nitrogen. And use it at different times. We would have gone out early nitrogen over the years, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And like we're only starting to spread recently. Well, obviously the weather was a big challenge there. What do we put in? We moved to about 30% clover swards and mixed species, which that gets our chemical nitrogen back down under 200 kilos, maybe down to around 100 180. So that seems to be where the limits are going to be set anyway. We have a lot of heavy land. I'm not so sure as clover is that's suitable for it, because you have to protect the stolon, which travels across the top of the soil. Of course, on those soils that are more, susceptible to treading damage, I'm not so sure. I haven't put clover into the wetter soils yet. I'm not sure I will, to be honest. Probably sit where we are for a few years and just see how the thing develops.
But you're seeing kind of improvement. Are you expanding? Yeah, well, you're going to leave where you are with the clover, sorry. But you've seen definite kind of improvement. Have you seen any improvement in the cattle, in their, I don't know, in a milk or anything like that? Or is it hard to?
Yeah, well, I mean, clover is more digestible than ryegrass on its own. There's no question about that. Mixed species is the same. I can't define it as liters in the tank or things like that. But of course, there's more management with clover. You have the threat of bloat, and I've got that over the years with cows, and that's a fair shock to the system when you see it. So you can't let animals gorge in these things. Let them out hungry. You have to be careful of how you manage it. So that's a learning experience for all farmers who've moved in that direction. It's very straightforward. The ryegrass, you open the gate, you let the stock in, and they graze away, and there is no risk per se. But with clover, totally different. You're on edge sometimes. You see, did I let the cows in there a little bit hungry, or was the wire put in the wrong place, or something like this? So there's more management skills required. Yeah, so that's a challenge. It's a learning experience, and I wouldn't say it's all been easy either.
Yeah, no, of course. And tell me, just because you mentioned it earlier, obviously the weather's been shocking the last while. Do you feel that by changing your grassland management to more multi-species over the ryegrass, can you see any improvement there, maybe in terms of your drainage or anything like that? Or
look, I'm not. We have a small bit of multi-species. I question the persistence of it. We've had it there the last couple of years, and you can see the chicory and the plantain starting to. I wouldn't like to have a farm of it now, to be honest. I'm guided by the research and that, but I'm not exuberant about it, to be honest. I'll move slowly and I'll mix it with the grass seeds when we're sowing it, but I seriously question the persistency of the stuff. If you get to 5 years, you'll be doing very well, and if you're looking at a lot more reseeding because of that, I don't know. I'm a little bit of an naysayer in this area, but it has to be said. Yeah.
And I think that's fair enough, and it's good because I think each land type is so different. And like you say, you've got quite heavy land, and it's interesting. You have said though that if you farm in a more technically efficient manner, you can leave more space for nature. Can you explain what you actually meant by that?
Yeah, well, the thing is it's kind of an oxymoron in a sense. I mean, the more land is farmed intensely, the more land can be left for nature, if you think about it. Because you produce more from a set area. Obviously, not going beyond the restrictions or anything like that. But I have no issue. We put 3 acres to one side there for the lake, and we did another bit of a pond there. It's not going to it's not going to threaten the bottom line or anything like that. If the rest of the farm is run well, and if the cows are and the grass is run to a good level of efficiency, you can leave space for nature to around the farm. That's my opinion anyway.
I'm guessing your 3 acres wasn't productive land anyway.
It was actually, yeah.
Oh, it was okay. Yeah. Okay. But
just happened to be the most suitable site. Okay, it wasn't the most productive area of land on the farm, but it was growing grass. Cows were grazing on it, and with just the site is suitable for what we wanted to do.
Okay, so you didn't feel the massive hit. You didn't have to take 3 cows out of your 3-to-1 mantra of your 3 acres.
Sure, we probably did, but we're still standing, and
yeah, still standing. Yeah,
the experience has been positive, so it's added it's added so much to the farm. It's actually been surprising and, you know, unexpected in a sense, because if you've never done something like this before, and then you see how it develops, like it's all, you know, it's all very positive.
So what have you seen from putting in your lake? What have you seen, or what has changed?
Well, obviously the species that came to live on it and what have you. I mean, there's plenty of ducks. There was 4 swans on it there most of the winter, and they'd fly over the farmyard maybe 2 or 3 times a week to be heading off to graze somewhere. We had water hens on it. There were little grebes they hatched out there last year, and they seemed to disappear over winter. But I heard one again there now a couple of days ago, so I'm not sure where they were for the winter, but they seem to be back again.
Mm.
And then during the hard weather in the winter, like in frosty weather and that, we get an awful lot of teal and things like that come into it. They seem to be driven around the place when the weather gets really hard. So yeah, it's only there 3 years. We put up an owl box down there and a kestrel box, but they're still vacant. So if you hear of anyone looking for a box, like we have an empty one.
Bit of narrow that way. I was speaking to a farmer though, and he said he had one up for 15 years, and it finally,
Yeah.
they
Mm.
hopefully it will be inhabited in time once the kind of the ecosystem balances or whatever. The did I read somewhere that you saw a kingfisher or come back to
Yeah,
to
with
the
kingfisher too. Yeah, the lads that are with me, they dug out the lake. They set up a trail cam there, and they picked up a kingfisher. And um, the worst thing about having a trail cam beside a lake is you have to go through hours of ducks, you see, before you actually see something different. Yeah.
a friend of mine set one up in grass as well. Don't do it beside grass that moves, and because obviously you're looking at loads of grass. Just out of interest, so if you said 19%, sorry about that, I'll change that on your profile, but you've left 19% to nature now at this stage between ponds and woodlands, etc. What do your neighbors think? Is there any kind of conversation about this? Is there, because you're kind of you are a productive dairy farmer in the area. Is there any conversation between your neighbors and yourself about like, the rest of your
Uh,
farm?
there's huge interest, an awful lot of people have come to see it, and you know, you go to the pub, like there's always somebody asking like what's going on at the lake or something like this. So it's I suppose it was kind of a way out thing to do at the time, but of course it was driven by COVID in a sense, really, because my father died in the middle of a COVID lockdown, and
Mm.
so with maximum restrictions, and bereavement is difficult enough at the best of times, but during COVID it got really tough. So
Mm.
given my father's interest in nature and everything, this is what we did, and it's actually has been a remarkable addition to the farm, and it's yeah, it's worked out really well.
Brilliant. It sounds like a nice, like you say, legacy to leave behind. So interesting enough, you yourself, I was going to ask, have you always had an interest in nature, but you're not too sure that you did, or what do you think?
Well, well, to be fair, I started putting in cow roadways, about 30 years ago, and the thing with getting herds of cows around the farm is we wanted to move smoothly, you see, so you want to minimize corners and bends and things like in the roadways. So I put in roadways at the time, and then the main roadways I put them dead straight, rather than following the hedge line or the water course. So that meant there was a strip of land left, inside the roadway. So one was actually, we've three quarters of an acre of ash trees, which I planted myself actually 30 years ago when we put in that roadway. But unfortunately now they've also come to the dieback. So I thinned them out there this winter. I didn't cut them all down, but a lot of them had to go anyway. So
It's devastating, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it's disappointing. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you don't expect to have to plant and cut down trees in your own lifetime. So
I know. That's not when you plant them for a different reason.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, it
yeah.
is it is influencing the way you farm over time, an interest in nature, really.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, if in my situation where your father was really into this stuff, I couldn't but rub off on you. I wouldn't say I was a total, laggard as regards it, but I suppose what's happened over the last couple of years has probably developed more of a passion for it, really, in a sense.
Mm.
Um, I mean, there's not too many corners or fields around the farm now that have been a fence put across them and something put in there, or, you know, trees or whatever. And so we took the view at the time, any field that had a corner was kind of a triangular shape. It was no bloody good because you couldn't get into it with machinery. It was too difficult. And if you had livestock grass, they'd all go in and lie there, and then they'd get up and trample, and they'd taint the grass, and they wouldn't graze it anyway. So we just put a fence across those corners. We didn't. I don't think we lost anything. We actually ended up a lot of those places, but we actually didn't lose that as regards to productivity of the farm.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. They're called hares corners now, I believe, but
yeah. And apparently they were called hares corners 100 years ago, but
yeah,
there was just a gap there in the use of the word. So that actually brings me on to, like, do you feel nature has helped or aided your business or the financial stability of your business at all, or of your farm as a business?
Well, look, it's added to, I'm not sure is the right word, the ambience of the farm. You know, how do you quantify something like that? How do you put a financial thing on it? You know, I don't look at it as it's not for financial benefit. It's for all the other things that are important in life, really. You know, so I think if we're doing it for financial reward, maybe we're doing it for the wrong reasons. I think.
Yeah, but it's not necessary. It's not hindering your business.
No,
but
absolutely
it's just
no.
a nicer place to live.
It gives it's an added interest. I mean, I'm milking cows for nearly 40 years at this stage. I mean, cows and grass, like, it can get fairly mundane, you know, but if you go down to the yard in the morning and you hear all the ducks quacking on the lake because it's only about 200 meters away, like, you know, and or the swans flying over the farmyard, like, you just couldn't be struck by the thing, you know, because like none of this was happening before we had the lake. So this has actually made a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like live TV. It's kind of, there's something always going on in the background.
Yeah.
In a nice way.
Mm.
So what are the main challenges you've had, do you find, kind of on this journey, like your farming journey? And I suppose in relation to nature, but in general, what are the do you find the main challenges?
I think challenge is too strong a word, to be honest. I suppose I'd like to see more farmers having an interest in it, you know, and maybe you have to kind of have a lived experience of this sort of stuff for you to actually appreciate it. And unfortunately, I don't know, you know, some farmers, I don't know how they're going to get this lived experience, if you understand me. That's the challenge for our industry, especially the dairy sector, I think. But you know, you're trying to push a rock or something like that, you know, and eventually you pick up steam and you know, value will be added. I hope anyway.
Yeah, and you definitely, obviously, do you find the conversations changing in the dairy sector at all, or is it's very slow?
It is slowly, yeah. There's no point saying otherwise. I mean, there's some people have huge interest in this, and they're nearly talking hushed tones, like, you know, to one side. Yeah, actually, so there's some people I thought would have no interest in this stuff actually are kind of, you know, closet devotees, like, you know, but they never really got anyone to talk to about, you know. So yeah,
it's interesting how we can, you know, help change that. If anyone's got any questions for David, please pop them in the chat box, and I'll ask them as we go along. So is there anywhere in particular that you go or went for advice or support, or anywhere that you would recommend for people, like, it's a good place to, if they're looking to kind of make changes or anything for their land?
Sure, a lot of the stuff we did. I mean, the background on the farm was, you know, game shooting. My father was a game shooter all his life, and so we looked at developing areas maybe for game, but your game developed, or, you know, it helped wildlife as well. So I suppose it's from reading books and things like. There's a lot more information available now. That's a big positive, and you have the farming for nature movement, if that's the word, and none of this was here 5 years ago. If it was, it's all been kept very quiet. The the challenges relation to our industry are now out in the open, and you know, we need to do something to realize improvements across the whole sector, and yeah, that's where we're at. There is a lot of there is way more information available, I would say, over the last 2 years, and I'm involved in discussion groups for nearly 30 years, and there was none of this stuff talked about until recently. It has to be said. And whereas in the dry stock sector, there was a lot more schemes, and there was probably more environmental awareness. There was a bigger income challenge, so all the schemes and everything were a necessity. And there was probably more environmental awareness in the dry stock sector maybe than the dairying sector because of those schemes and things. I was never in any scheme. I was in Reps 4 at the end. That must be 15 years ago, but I'm not in acres. I'm not in gloss. I'm not in any of those things. So, yeah. So, and most of the guys I mix with are not in these schemes either.
Yeah. And again, is it not a dairy? They don't kind of appeal to the dairy industry, these schemes, or is it just, what do you think?
I suppose there wasn't the economic vulnerability. Dairying done well is a good income. It's bloody hard work too, though, especially this time of year. So I suppose there wasn't the challenge of having to go into schemes, Yeah.
And it is hard work. And you were saying you have a student on your land, comes over for a few months to help you, and I'm sure lots of other people do as well. I'm gathering success, unless it's appealing to the next generation. Like you were saying, your farm is becoming a nicer place to live for you as as time goes on. But I'm guessing for generations coming up looking at farming and dairy, like that kind of appeal is shifted or shifting. What do you think?
It's shifting slowly. You can't use any other word. As I said, we have a challenge, and it's just it's going to take a good bit of effort. I think Tagish, they needed to up their game, and to be fair, they have done in the last couple of years, but that needed to be done because the advice or the awareness of the importance of these things on dairy farms wasn't there until recently, in my opinion. But as I said, to be fair, there's big improvements happening now, but look, they needed to happen.
Yeah, perfect. So I mean, I'm coming towards the end of my kind of few questions I have scribbled down. So if anyone has any questions, like I say, under your black bar, there's a chat box, so feel free to ask David some questions. But is there any one memory that stands out for you, David, in terms of nature returning to your land? I mean, you've given us a lovely description there of your lake and stuff, but is there anything else that kind of stands out for you?
Well, that Merlin app on your phone is a great job altogether. If you don't know all these birds and everything, and then you pick up something on your phone and say, "Just that couldn't be right." It was, so I picked up on my phone one day. It was this oyster catcher or something like that. I think it's a seabird, and I said, "This is crazy." It couldn't be here. Yeah. So I got out the binoculars and I went, look, and here was this fella. He was hidden in under the rushes on the side of the lake, and I said, "We're that good now. He's after leaving the sea."
You'll find no oysters hereby, and that's gas, isn't it? And have you seen him since?
No. You do get occasional birds. You turn on the Merlin app, and you by and large you get the same birds every time you go down, and then out of the blue you get a total random outsider or something like that, and it's things like that probably stand out in a sense.
But so the Merlin app takes the audio, is it, that's playing at the time?
Sure. It listens to the birds and it identifies the birds on the basis of their song. It's actually it's Cornell University in the States developed it. I have it for about the last year, and it's actually I've so many people have started using it. It just and it's just fantastic. You hear a noise of a bird or something, and you say, "I wonder what that is," and just turn on the phone. You have it hopefully maybe in a minute or two.
Yeah, and in a way, I mean, by identifying, you know, kind of gathers a bit more interest. You're kind of, oh yeah, where it is and what's it up to and what's it eating, and you know, it definitely builds up the knowledge. And just finally there, David, have you got any kind of top tips, main things to consider that every or any dairy farmer in Ireland could do for nature? What would be what would be your kind of 5 tips that you would recommend?
If you want something to happen quickly, it has to involve water. You know, trees and hedges and everything, great, but I mean, it's long term. Like you're talking 30 years, really, maybe 20 years for a decent hedgerow to develop. And you know, it happens, but you don't see it happening because it takes so long. But I found with even the smaller ponds we've dug out around the place, and you see, you know, stuff moving, even frogs and things like that. Actually, you know, a pond half the size of a tennis court or something would actually make things happen really, really quickly, in my opinion. Yeah, I found back in the day.
Did you dig in line, or did you just dig and build up a bank, or like was there a spring there? How did you feed the water into it?
No, we just diverted a stream into it. That's how we actually hit some springs in the lake when we were digging it out, but we didn't know they were there. Yeah, so we dug out a small pond there this year for the hare's corner. Actually, there is no running supply. That's at the bottom of a very steep hill, so it's just completely reliant on the runoff of those hills. Yeah, and it's full despite having no running water supply because of the weather we've had. Yeah, little things like that. I remember back in the day, we had a lot of sheep and the hedgerows were wrecked back in the 80s. So I remember my father planting off the hedges, and we just went around with whitethorn quicks in all the gaps. And now it's like Fort Knox, like 30 years later, like all the hedges, just transformations, little things like that you could do. And as I mentioned about the corners, like I'd say if anyone takes an in-depth look at a corner of field, to say a corner that's not really been used at all. You know, it's not a habitat. It doesn't even have to be wet or anything. It'd be better if it wasn't. But even take a fence off across a corner, and it's remarkable what you can do planting or whatever in corners like that.
And do you graze it ever, or do you just leave it?
Pardon?
The corners. Do you never graze the corner, like you were saying, the
Oh,
cattle?
obviously they graze outside the fence. But yeah, so
it's a permanent fence. Yeah,
permanent fence. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Sean and Farrell is asked here. Hi, David. Thanks for the very interesting story and nature enhancement initiatives. Now to the hard question. Do you plan for the agricultural sector emissions reductions of 25% to address climate change? And do you think that other dairy farmers consider this target?
Yeah, I think actually agriculture is one of the few sectors that are going to hit their targets. Just seeing the changes in fertilizer use and things like that. Like there's things happening in agriculture now. If there's things happening in the other sectors, I'm not hearing about it anyway. So I'd be quite confident agriculture will hit their targets.
Okay. And Telia Hoff has asked, what species have you planted in your hare's corner?
Well, our hare's corner is a pond. So this year that we planted, so look, I planted some alder trees. We made an island in the middle of it, so I just planted some alder trees on it before the water got into it. So when it could get access, we have no access to it now because the water's too deep. But so look, the corners around the farm, we've done everything from, you know, oak, ash, all the different things over the years. Holly, Gilder rose is good, you know, add a bit of color to areas like that. Yeah, they're just the main ones. I think just we planted a lot of Scots pine down around the lake, about 300 of them mixed with mountain ash mixed through it. So, you know, there's a lot of, every farm around here probably has 1 or 2 Scots pine. There's not very many of them, but it seems to be actually scattered all over the countryside when you go looking for them. So I think they're very nice trees. So we planted those on one side of the lake.
They're stunning in maturity, aren't they? Like the bark and stuff. Yeah. And what kind of height would they be now? Is it just 3 years old?
Sure, some of them would be. They're all old. Some of them are up to your waist. I was just going to say there, a neighbour across the road built a house 40 years ago, and they planted Scots pine in the garden at the time, and it's gone over the height of the house there at the moment, so I can actually fairly well predict what pace they're going to grow, and that was on good land.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant.
Mm.
Pele has also asked, have you ever left any of these species that you planted in the corners to just wild to reseed themselves?
Well, we're just going to leave the 3/4 of an acre with the ash. Obviously, it's all fenced off because of the cow roadway running alongside it. But there are 3 mature oak trees on one side of it, so I'm not going to plant anything in there. Like there's a couple of oak saplings managed to grow even with the ash and everything there. So I think there's twice as much space in it now because we thinned it over the winter. So I think that'll just natural regeneration. We won't plant anything there. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, and what's your kind of plan for your farm? Do you have a kind of is it like will you continue the dairy and the sheep or you don't have like will you continue
Yeah.
planting 300 Scots pines? And
Look, we're at 20%. I'm not going beyond that, really.
yeah.
It's there. You have to think about the next generation too, which mightn't appreciate the whole farm being planted or anything like that. So, I've only put probably about 5 or 6% to what my father had already done in his lifetime. So we'll leave the next generation to make that decision. As regards to actual running of the farm, there'll be no great change. We're at capacity. Of course, we have to worry this whole derogation thing, which would be a big drop in cow numbers, catastrophic for us actually. And if that happens, hopefully it doesn't happen. So that could be the only change as regards to actual livestock on the farm.
Mm. And for those that don't understand like derogation or aren't dairy farmers, can you just explain kind of back of an envelope style what that is and what it means for you going forward?
Look, we're stocked about cows to the acre, which in EU terms is 220 kilos of organic nitrogen. That's what the cow herself excretes. So we have a derogation from 170, which is 170 kilos is basically across Europe. We have derogation Netherlands, I think Denmark, somebody else, I'm not really sure. And look, issues have environmental issues have arisen. So we were actually up as high as 250, so that's gone back to 220. The 170 kilos is not an issue on continental Europe because they have a continental climate. Obviously, they have cold winters, they have warm summers, and there's effectively no livestock grazing. If you drive all across Central Europe, Germany, all those countries, all the stock are indoors. But we have a maritime climate. We're warmed by the Gulf Stream. We grow more grass if it's above water. In the spring and the autumn, we have a longer growing season, so we can take advantage of the 220 kilos. Obviously, we have to tidy up issues in relation to water quality and whatever like that, but I think that's doable. It just remains to be seen. Like it seems to be kind of a lastminute.com job where we kind of have 2 years or 3 years to sort out problems. So, I'm just worried the time scale is so short that we may get caught, and it would be an economic disaster for a lot of farms, and it'll actually be an ecological disaster because if we're forced to go farm at 170 kilos, we'd have dairy farmers going chasing around the country looking for little bits of land or whatever to dilute their stocking rate. By and large, that land would be less intensively farmed than they would farm it, which wouldn't be good for ecology and biodiversity, in my opinion. And the other choice is cows would be put indoors like Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland could get all the milk quota they want from the UK mainland during the quota regime because the UK never filled their quota. They ended up in a position they hadn't enough land to produce the milk they were capable of producing. So 50% of the cows in Northern Ireland are housed. And
12 months of the year.
12 months of the year, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay. Interesting.
So it'll be 1 or 2 of those things, probably chasing extra blocks of land to dilute your stocking rate, or cows spending more time indoors, maybe even full time, would be the outcome of going to 170 kilos. That's not
I definitely
to mean
feel that farmers preempting that, and there's like lands are already being bought up for the just in case.
It's going on. It's going on all over the place. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
that bit of land that was only been kind of half farmed has now has realized a big value, which it didn't have heretofore. That's like all decisions like this, they kind of have unforeseen circumstances and our outcomes. So that would be one of them, yeah.
And is there any kind of advice going forward for dairy farmers how to best tackle this, or it's not clear yet?
So we have to sort the water quality issue. It seems to be like if water quality can be stabilized, we might hold on to it. But yeah, as I said, the problem is that climate change is definitely having an effect now because all these extremes of rain, big dumps of rain, as I was talking about, like it's putting. We all need more slurry storage to store soil, water, and whatever for spreading at a more suitable time. That's probably the one thing that could have a big impact. And of course, then all the reductions in fertilizer limits and all that, they will have an impact over time. But as I said, my fear is the time frame is too short.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And do you feel, just because we've spoken about you mentioned the weather changes there again, do you feel yourself on your farm, you're finding that you're feeling the pressure to find your own ways to adapt to climate change, or finding ways to mitigate against it, or are there? But I suppose the adaptation is the important bit, because you can't. I mean,
yeah, we went from three exceptionally warm and dry summers, and 2018 was the worst, or maybe the best if you weren't a farmer. But we went from there now to we've had 2 dry months in the last year. February last year was totally dry. May was totally dry. It's basically there was no hay made in Ireland between May and September last year. None. Which was either made in May or was made in September.
Yeah.
Now, nobody can say to me that that's not a challenge to farm in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously feed and bedding, everything that's associated with that. Yeah. Interesting.
But look,
and is there
farming was always about challenges. Like there's always a problem in farming. Like, I never, every year there was a problem. This is the current problem. This problem seems to be hanging around for a long time.
Fair enough. But listen, unless anyone else got any questions for you, is there anything else you'd like to mention that you feel we haven't covered, David, or anything that you'd like to say, suggest, or opportunities that you feel that are out there for dairy farmers?
Do you feel? I'm looking at a question here.
Yeah, I see. I was just about to ask it there. Una Duggan has asked, I'll come back to my question, but Una Duggan has asked, do you feel confident in the measure you're being asked to undertake, or the advice you're given to ensure that water quality is protected?
Which the farmers farming and derogation have undertaken more mitigation measures than probably the rest of the industry put together, to be honest. The problem is I don't know what to call the water. Nobody can put a time frame on, say, like we fenced all the stock out of the rivers, or we put bridges in, and we've kept back from but nobody can actually put a time frame on when that'll improve the water. Okay, we say this, it'll start to improve in 2 years' time, but nobody can say it. This is the problem. It's just such a grey area. Yeah. I'm confident what we have done, and say on my own farm, I'm confident what we have done. Look, our local water quality is very good. I actually went into the EPA stand at the ploughing match, and I drilled down to the dot, and the local sampling point is 4 kilometres away, and the water quality is good. Is not deemed to be at risk. But I'm in the upper reaches of the Barrow catchment, which is a problem. So that's the frustrating thing about it. Like I could do all the right things, but still have no impact.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And is there joint up thinking when you are in catchment areas?
Joined up, I think just there may not be enough people power on the issue. I'm talking about in the councils, things like this. not sure it's been taken seriously, to be honest, until, just getting very depressing.
Fair enough. No, and it's a tricky one, water, because it's one thing that you have to share with your neighbor, and it's an issue that you have to, not you, but we all need to take joint responsibility for, because it's we do share. Like, you can't just keep it within your farm gate as the river's flying past you. Okay, well, unless there's any other questions there. Yeah, so Dave, is there anything else you'd like to mention, or feel you've covered?
Look, I think we've covered everything, to be honest. So look, as I said, I didn't expect to be involved in this area a few years ago, even not that many years ago, and it has been a very interesting experience. And that's just credit to Farming for Nature and what's going on down there. And I suppose the genesis of that is down in the Burren and whatever. So they've had their challenges as well. So it's kind of, from small seeds, big trees grow. So all I can do is wish.
And I think the interesting thing about Farming for Nature is everyone's on a different stage of the journey. Do you know what I mean? So by highlighting different kind of people at different stages on a spectrum, I think it's really important, because then it's like other people find it more approachable, and they can see what's been done. And I think you've given us a really nice message that you're 19%, but you're still a productive, profit-making dairy farmer. So that's I think that's important. Margaret Brennan has said, thanks so much, David. Delighted about your lake. Great job. Well done to all you've achieved. So listen, David, thanks so much for being my guest today. And it's been really interesting. And thanks for taking the time out. And I'm at a very busy season for you. So thank you for that. And hopefully we'll maybe consider a farm walk on your land this summer. So if anyone's interested in that, hopefully we can convince David that'd be a really nice thing. I'm dying to see this lake of his. It sounds very impressive. So next up is Justina and Liam Gavin from Drumlera Farm up in County Leitrim, Roscommon, that area. Sorry, they're kind of on the border there. And they will be talking to us about their gate to plate farm that they have there. So they have a farm, but also a restaurant. And so that will be on the second Tuesday of April, so at 8 p.m. that day. So listen, David, thanks so much. If anyone missed part of this, it will be up on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours or so. And if you missed any previous ones, they're also up on our YouTube channel. So David, thanks a million. You've been a star for joining us tonight. And thanks so much for all your, for sharing all your knowledge and really painting a picture of your farm and introducing me even more to the world of dairy. So thank you for that. And,
thanks, Bridget.
We'll chat to you again soon. Thanks, David.
Take care.